The council chamber floated in the darkness of space, a massive ring of metal and glass that orbited the neutral world of Kester Prime. Inside, representatives from 47 different species sat in their designated sections, their various forms creating a bizarre tapestry of galactic diversity. Some breathed oxygen, others methane. Some had scales, others had fur or crystalline skin. But today, they all shared one common purpose. They had gathered to watch humanity fall. Deihayan stood in the center of the chamber, his simple gray suit making him look almost insignificant compared to the ornate robes and armor worn by the other delegates. He was a thin man with quiet eyes and graying hair at his temples. For 20 years, he had represented Earth in this chamber. For 20 years, he had smiled politely, voted carefully, and made sure that humanity remained beneath notice. Today, that was about to change. Representative of Earth, boomed a voice that sounded like grinding stones. Overlord Krill rose from his throne-like seat, his forearms spreading wide in a gesture of dominance. The Vreks were massive creatures, standing nearly 3 meters tall, with thick gray hide covered in bony plates. They had conquered 40 worlds in the last century, and each victory had made them bolder. The Galactic Council has reached its decision. Deihayan said nothing. He simply clasped his hands behind his back and waited. Your species has occupied 17 systems for the past 300 years, Krill continued, his lipless mouth pulling back to reveal rows of sharp teeth. These systems contain resources that the galactic community requires. The Council has determined that humanity's claim to these territories is inefficient and wasteful. Around the chamber, other representatives nodded. The Kishari delegate, a being made of living crystal, chimed her agreement. The Polvax ambassador, whose tentacles writhed constantly, bubbled something in his liquid speech that the translators rendered as enthusiastic support. Therefore, Krill said, his voice rising with obvious pleasure, the Council demands that humanity surrender 14 of your 17 colony worlds within 10 solar cycles. These worlds will be redistributed to more deserving species. You will retain your homeworld and 2 minor settlements, which should be sufficient for your limited population. Murmurs of approval rippled through the chamber. This was how things worked in galactic politics. The strong took what they wanted. The weak accepted their fate. And humanity had always been so very, very weak. Deihayan finally spoke, his voice calm and measured. And if we refuse? Krill's laugh was like an avalanche. Then we will take them by force. My empire's fleet already surrounds your precious colonies. 6,000 warships, human. 6,000. Your species has what? A few hundred patrol boats? Some mining vessels with welded-on weapons? He leaned forward, his massive frame casting a shadow over Deihayan. Do not be foolish. Accept the Council's generous terms. Keep your lives, if not your worlds. The other delegates waited for Deihayan's response. This was always the moment they enjoyed most. The moment when a weaker species realized it had no choice. The moment of submission. But Deihayan did something unexpected. He smiled. It was not a large smile, nor a particularly threatening one. It was the kind of smile a teacher might give a student who had just made an obvious mistake. And somehow, that smile made Overlord Krill's 4 hands curl into fists. I see, Deihayan said quietly. Before I respond to the Council's demands, I should probably make a phone call. Would that be acceptable? The chamber fell silent. A phone call? What kind of response was that? A phone call? Krill repeated, his voice dripping with contempt. To whom? Your pathetic government? They cannot change mathematics, human. Cannot change the fact that you are outnumbered and outgunned. Nevertheless, Deihayan said, reaching into his pocket, I should check with my people before making such an important decision. He pulled out a small silver device, no larger than his palm. This will only take a moment. The council watched in confusion as Dahan pressed his thumb against the device. It glowed briefly with a soft blue light. He didn't speak into it, didn't say anything at all. He simply held it for 3 seconds, then returned it to his pocket. There, he said pleasantly. Done? Done? Krill roared. What game is this, human? No game, Dahan replied. I just activated a signal. You see, Overlord Krill, humanity has a saying. It goes something like this. Speak softly and carry a big stick. For 300 years, we have spoken very, very softly. He turned slowly, looking at each delegate in turn. We came to the stars and found you all here. We saw how things worked. We watched the Vrex conquer the Telendi. We saw the Keshari enslave the Mulviks. We learned that in this galaxy, strength is the only language that matters. Ancient history, Krill snapped. What is your point? My point, Dahan said, is that we learned. We adapted. We prepared. He gestured toward the massive windows that lined the council chamber, showing the starfield beyond. And now, I think it's time to show you what we've been preparing. For a moment, nothing happened. The stars continued to shine in their eternal patterns, beautiful and unchanging. Then one of them moved. The Keshari delegate saw it first, her crystalline body chiming in alarm. Then another delegate noticed, and another. Within seconds, every being in the chamber was staring out the windows in growing confusion and horror. The stars were moving. Not all of them. Just a few dozen. Then a few hundred. Then thousands. They shifted position, drifted sideways, formed new patterns in the darkness. What is this? Krill demanded. What trick is this? Dahan walked to the nearest window and placed his hand against the glass. Those aren't stars, Overlord. They're ships. Human ships. Every single one of them has been out there for decades. Hidden by stealth technology, your scientists told you was impossible. Waiting. Watching. As if responding to his words. The nearest star suddenly blazed with light. It grew larger and larger as it approached the council station, and soon its true form became visible. It was a warship, sleek and deadly, easily twice the size of the largest Rex dreadnought. And as it passed the station, more ships appeared behind it. Hundreds of them. Thousands. This is impossible, whispered the Polvax ambassador. Impossible, Dahan agreed, is a word we don't like very much. He turned back to face Overlord Krill, and this time his smile had no warmth in it at all. Now then, let me tell you Earth's terms. You have 10 solar cycles to withdraw every single Vrex ship from human space. Every single one. If even a patrol boat remains after that deadline, we will interpret it as an act of war. You dare threaten me? Krill roared, his 4 fists slamming against his throne. My empire has 6,000 ships surrounding your colonies right now. 6,000? Had, Dahan corrected softly. Past tense. Because right now, each of those 6,000 ships is surrounded by 50 human vessels. Do the math, Overlord. That's 300,000 ships. And that's just the ones we've decided to show you. The council chamber erupted in chaos. Delegates screamed questions in 40 different languages. Alarms began blaring as the station's sensors finally registered the massive fleet that had appeared around them. Through it all, Dahan stood quietly in the center of the chamber, his hands still clasped behind his back. He looked up at the ships passing overhead, their running lights creating new constellations in the ancient dark. For 300 years, humanity had been patient. For 300 years, they had built and planned and prepared in absolute secrecy. And now, finally, the galaxy would learn what it meant to underestimate the quiet species from the little blue world. The sky had torn apart, and nothing would ever be the same. The council chamber had descended into chaos. Delegates shouted at each other in dozens of languages, while their translators struggled to keep up. Emergency lights flashed along the walls as the station's defense systems tried to comprehend the massive fleet that had appeared from nowhere. And outside the windows, human ships continued to drift past in an endless parade of military power. Hannah watched it all from her position near the chamber's entrance. To everyone else in the station, she was simply Commander Hannah of Station Security, a woman who checked credentials and made sure delegates didn't carry weapons into the council sessions. She wore the same gray uniform as the other security officers, carried the same basic sidearm, and had spent 15 years making herself completely unremarkable. But that act was over now. She touched the communicator in her ear and spoke quietly. All teams move to Phase 2. Secure all Vrex personnel and their allies. No violence unless they resist. We're still the good guys here. Around the station, 30 disguised human operatives began moving with sudden purpose. They weren't security guards anymore. They were special forces soldiers who had trained for this exact scenario for years. In the council chamber, Overlord Krill had finally stopped roaring. He stared out at the human fleet with all 4 of his eyes wide. "This is a trick," he said, but his voice had lost its earlier confidence. "Holograms, projections, it has to be." Daehyun shook his head. "Would you like to verify? I can arrange for your flagship to do a sensor sweep." "Oh, wait," he touched his communicator. "Captain G1, could you decloak next to the Vrex command ship? Give them a close look." In orbit around the station, one of the largest, human vessels shimmered into visibility, less than a kilometer from Krill's personal dreadnought. The human ship was a monster, bristling with weapons and sensor arrays. It dwarfed the Vrex flagship like an adult standing next to a child. Krill's communicator began screaming with panicked reports from his crew. He listened for a moment, then looked back at Daehyun with something approaching fear. "How?" he whispered. "How did you hide all this? We've been watching Earth for 300 years. You've been watching what we wanted you to see," Daehyun replied. He gestured to the nearest display screen, which flickered to life, showing an image of Earth. "You thought we were just another species trying to survive in your dangerous galaxy. And you were right. We were trying to survive. But we learned very quickly that survival requires more than hope and good intentions." The screen changed, showing historical footage of the Talendi civilization. They had been a peaceful people who loved art and music. Their cities had been beautiful, their culture rich. The Vrex Empire had conquered them in 3 weeks, killed half their population, and enslaved the rest. "We arrived in this galaxy 340 years ago," Daehyun said quietly. "Our first colony ship made contact with the Talendi just before the Vrex attacked them. We watched, helpless, as an entire civilization died. We had nothing but civilian transports and construction equipment. We couldn't save them." The screen showed more images now. Human colonists watching in horror as Vrex ships bombed Talendi cities. Human volunteers trying to evacuate refugees with nothing but cargo shuttles. And finally, human leaders gathering in secret, making a decision that would shape humanity's future. "That day, our government made a choice," Daehyun continued. "We would never be helpless again. But we also understood something important. In this galaxy, showing strength gets you attacked. The Keshari enslave any species they think is weaker. The Polvax absorb other cultures entirely. The Vrex conquer everyone they can. So we decided to do something different." The screen changed again, showing the construction of humanity's first stealth ship. Then another. Then vast shipyards hidden inside asteroids, beneath ocean floors, in the atmospheres of gas giants. We built, Deion said simply. For 300 years, we built. Every mining colony had hidden construction facilities. Every civilian transport had military-grade weapons hidden in its cargo holds. Every human in space was part of the plan. We turned our entire civilization into one giant secret. Captain Jiwan's voice came through the speakers, calm and professional. Representative, all wrecked ships in human space have been surrounded. They've stopped moving. I think they understand the situation. Good, Deion replied. Hold position, but do not fire unless fired upon. Overlord Krill's communicator was still screaming with reports. His commanders were telling him the same thing from 14 different systems. Tens of thousands of human ships had appeared around every Rex vessel. They hadn't attacked, but the message was clear. They could have. At any moment. This changes nothing, Krill said, but he sounded uncertain now. My empire controls a quarter of the galaxy. We have allies, resources. We can bring millions of ships to bear against you. You could try, agreed a new voice. Everyone turned to see Hannah walking down the center aisle of the chamber, but she moved differently now. Gone was the humble security officer. This was a soldier's walk, confident and dangerous. But you should know something first. Every single one of your allies, every government that supports you, has been infiltrated by human intelligence for the past 200 years. She stopped next to Deion and continued speaking. We know every secret you have, Overlord. We know about your supply lines, your weapons development, your political weaknesses. We know which of your commanders are loyal, and which ones are just waiting for you to show weakness. We know everything. A small figure appeared on the screen behind them. It was a Rex female, but she wore human military insignia. Hello, Overlord, she said in perfect Rex. I am Agent Nari. For the past 23 years, I have served as your chief strategic advisor. You trusted me with your deepest secrets. You asked my opinion on every major decision. And every single day, I reported everything to Earth. Krill staggered backward as if he'd been struck. Nari? But you're Rex. How? I'm human, Nari replied. Genetically modified to look like one of your species. Raised from childhood to infiltrate your government. And I'm not alone. We have agents in every major power in the galaxy. Some of them have been in place for generations. The Kishari delegate suddenly stood up, her crystalline body chiming in alarm. This is an outrage. You've been spying on all of us? Yes, Deion said bluntly. Because that's what survival requires. You built a galaxy where only the strong and the ruthless thrive. So we became strong. And we became very, very good at being ruthless when necessary. He walked slowly around the chamber, looking at each delegate in turn. But here's the thing. We don't want to rule you. We don't want to conquer you. We just want to be left alone to live our lives in peace. That's all we've ever wanted. Then why reveal yourselves now? Ask the Polvax ambassador, his tentacles writhing nervously. Why not stay hidden? Because you pushed us, Deion replied. You demanded our colonies. You surrounded our worlds with warships. You forced our hand. He stopped in front of Krill's throne. We didn't want this. But you need to understand something. Humanity is done being quiet, done being invisible. From this day forward, the galaxy knows the truth. And if any of you ever threaten human lives again, you'll learn exactly how far we're willing to go. Overlord Krill looked around the chamber at the other delegates, searching for support. But they were all staring at the human fleet outside, counting ships, calculating odds. The math was simple and brutal. Humanity had more firepower than the rest of the galaxy combined. What do you want? Krill finally asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Right now? Just for you to leave, Deihayan replied. Withdraw your ships from human space. Go home. Think very carefully about what happens next. And if I refuse? Deihayan's expression didn't change. Then we'll make you leave. And we'll do it in a way that ensures you never threaten anyone ever again. For a long moment, Krill said nothing. Then he touched his communicator. All Vrex ships begin withdrawal from human territories. Fall back to Imperial space. Smart choice, Hana said quietly, but as the Vrex began their retreat, Krill's eyes narrowed. He looked at Deihayan with pure hatred. This isn't over, human. My empire will not accept this humiliation. We will return with everything we have, and then we'll see how tough you really are. Deihayan sighed. I was afraid you'd say something like that. Outside the windows, the human fleet began to move with purpose, reorganizing into battle formations. And in the darkness between the stars, millions more ships began powering up their weapon systems. The demonstration was over. Now came the test. The colony world of New Bizon had been peaceful for over a century. 15 million humans called it home, living in cities that sprawled across continents of purple grass and blue-leaved forests. Children played in parks, farmers tended crops that grew in the alien soil, and merchants sold goods in markets that hummed with the sound of 1,000 conversations. Nobody there knew that their world had been built on top of the largest military installation. In human space, Daihayan Wu sat in the cockpit of his fighter, 3 kilometers beneath the ocean surface, and tried to keep his breathing steady. He was 24 years old, and until 2 days ago, he'd thought he was just a civilian pilot who flew cargo transports between the colony and its orbital stations. Then his real orders had come through, and he'd discovered that his whole life had been preparation for this moment. All pilots, status check, came Captain Jiwan's voice through his helmet speakers. She was somewhere above them in the stealth dreadnought Unseen Horizon, commanding the defense of New Bizon. Blue Squadron, ready, Haiyan Wu replied, his voice tight with tension. Around him, 99 other fighters sat in their underwater hangar. Pilots checking weapons and shields. Red Squadron, ready? Gold Squadron, ready. The confirmations continued until all 2,000 fighters had reported in. And that was just the fighters. The underwater base also held destroyers, frigates, and 3 massive carriers that had been assembled piece by piece over 50 years, disguised as civilian shipbuilding facilities. Contact in 3 minutes, Jiwan announced. The Vrex fleet is approaching the colony. 6,000 ships just like intelligence predicted. Haiyan Wu pulled up the tactical display on his cockpit screen. He could see them coming, a vast swarm of red dots representing the Vrex Armada. Overlord Krill had been true to his word. He'd gathered every ship he could spare and thrown them at New Bizon in a show of force meant to terrify humanity into submission. He had no idea what he was actually flying. Into Engineering Chief Soman. Here, said another voice on the command channel. All defensive systems are active. The grid is ready. Soman worked in what everyone thought was a geothermal power plant in the colony's northern continent. In reality, she coordinated the most advanced defensive network ever built. Thousands of gravity generators hidden across the planet's surface, each one capable of bending space itself. Admiral Taiyang to all forces, came a new voice. Older and calm with the weight of command. Remember, our objective is to protect every single civilian on that planet. Not most of them, not 99%, every single one. We do not lose people today. Is that understood? Yes, sir, came the unified response from thousands of soldiers. Haiyan Wu felt his hands steady on the controls. Admiral Taiyang was a legend in the Hidden Fleet. They said he'd never lost a battle, never sacrificed a soldier unnecessarily. If he said nobody would die today, then nobody would die. Vrex fleet entering weapons range, Jiwan reported. They're powering up their main guns, targeting the population centers. On his screen, Haiyan Wu watched as the Vrex ships spread out into attack formation. They were being methodical about it, professional. They would fire on all the major cities, simultaneously trying to kill as many humans as possible in the opening salvo. Hold position, Jiwan ordered. Let them commit. The waiting was the hardest part. Haiyan Wu could see the Vrex weapons charging, could imagine the people in the cities above going about their normal days, completely unaware that death was seconds away. Vrex fleet firing. Someone shouted thousands of energy beams and missiles launched from the Vrex ships, enough firepower to crack a planet's crust. They streaked toward New Bizin in brilliant lines of destruction. Defensive grid, activate, Somin commanded. The gravity generators powered up all at once. Space around New Bizin twisted and bent in ways that physics said were impossible. The incoming weapons fire hit these distortions and suddenly changed direction, bending away from their targets like water flowing around a rock. But the generators did more than just deflect. They redirected. Every beam, every missile found itself turned around and sent back toward its source. The Vrex Armada had 3 seconds to realize what was happening. Then their own weapons slammed into their own ships. Explosions bloomed across the Vrex formation as ships were destroyed by their own firepower. Hulls ruptured, reactors overloaded, and entire vessels simply ceased to exist. In the span of 10 seconds, over 3,000 Vrex ships died, killed, by the very weapons they'd intended to use on civilians. Holy, Haiyan Wu whispered, watching the carnage on his screen. All squadrons launch, Jiwan ordered. Show them what else we've been hiding. The ocean floor beneath New Bizin opened up. Massive hangar doors that had been disguised as natural. Rock formations swung wide, and humanity's hidden fleet began to rise. Fighters burst from the water in perfect formation, their engines leaving trails of steam. Destroyers followed, then cruisers, then the carriers themselves, water cascading from their hulls, like waterfalls. Haiyan Wu's fighter shot upward through the ocean, accelerating so quickly that the pressure would have killed him if not for the inertial dampeners. Within seconds, he broke through the surface and into open air, then continued climbing toward space. Blue Squadron, engage enemy fighters, he commanded, settling into the role he'd trained for his entire life without knowing it. Keep them away from the colony. His squadron spread out around him, each pilot moving with practiced precision. The fighters were small and fast, equipped with weapons that made them far more dangerous than their size suggested. And each one had an AI co-pilot that could predict enemy movements 3 seconds into the future. A Vrex interceptor dove at Haiyan Wu from above, its guns already firing. His AI highlighted the threat and showed him exactly where the enemy would be in 3 seconds. Haiyan Wu didn't try to dodge the current attack. Instead, he fired at the empty space where his AI predicted the Vrex ship would be. 3 seconds later, the enemy flew directly into his weapons fire and exploded. Target eliminated, Haiyan Wu reported calmly, already acquiring his next target. All around him, his squadron was doing the same thing. The Vrex pilots were skilled, but they were fighting an enemy that could see the future. It wasn't a fair fight. In orbit, the capital ships were engaging. Captain Jiwan's unseen horizon had positioned itself between the Vrex fleet and the colony, a single dreadnought facing thousands of enemy ships. All weapons, fire at will, Jiwan ordered. The unseen horizon opened up with everything it had. Particle beams that could slice through shields like paper, missiles that could track targets through hyperspace jumps, and kinetic weapons that fired slugs of metal accelerated to near light. Speed, each one hitting with the force of a nuclear bomb. Vrex ships died by the dozens, then by the hundreds. But they kept coming, kept firing, kept trying to break through to the colony below. They were following their orders even in the face of impossible odds. Jiwan almost felt sorry for them. Almost. Engineering. What's the status of the experimental weapon? She asked. Dimensional cannon is charged and ready, came the reply. Target the center of their formation. Fire. A beam of impossible darkness lanced out from the unseen horizon. Where it touched Vrex ships, they didn't explode. They simply ceased to exist, erased from reality by a weapon that reached into other dimensions. 20 ships vanished in an instant, leaving not even debris behind. The Vrex fleet finally broke. Ships began turning away, trying to retreat, abandoning any pretense of an organized attack. Admiral Taiyang to Vrex, command ship, the admiral's voice came over all frequencies. You have 10 seconds to surrender, or we will destroy every ship in the system. 10, 9, 8. The Vrex commander didn't even let him reach 0. We surrender! We surrender! Cease fire! The battle was over. It had lasted 17 minutes. That Haiyan Wu brought his fighter back around toward the unseen horizon, joining the other squadrons in formation. Below him, New Bizan sparkled in the light of its sun, completely untouched. 15 million people had slept through the entire battle, protected by defenders they didn't even know existed. All forces stand down to alert status, Admiral Taiyang ordered. And somebody get me a damage report. Damage report is simple, sir, Jiwan replied. Enemy casualties, 3,847 ships destroyed. Human casualties, 0. Not a single scratch on any of our vessels. In his cockpit, Haiyan Wu smiled. Admiral Taiyang had promised that nobody would die today, and he'd been right. But as the human fleet began securing the surrendered Vrex ships, a new message came through from Earth. Overlord Krill wasn't accepting defeat. He was gathering his full strength, every ship in the Vrex Empire, for one final assault. And this time, his target was Earth itself. 3 weeks after the Battle of New Bizan, the largest invasion fleet in galactic history arrived at the edge of the Sol system. 53,000 Vrex warships dropped out of hyperspace in perfect formation, a wall of gray metal and violent intent stretching across millions of kilometers of space. Overlord Krill stood on the bridge of his personal super dreadnought, the Infinite Conquest, and looked at the small blue planet hanging in the darkness ahead. Earth, the whole world of the species that had humiliated him. Today, he would teach the humans and the entire galaxy a lesson about the price of defying the Vrex Empire. Open a broadcast on all frequencies, he commanded. His communications officer obeyed, and Krill's face appeared on every screen in the Sol system. Humans of Earth, you have struck at the Vrex Empire and survived only because we underestimated you. That mistake will not be repeated. I have brought 53,000 warships to your door. Surrender now, and I will allow your species to live as slaves. Resist, and I will turn your homeworld into a graveyard. You have 1 hour to respond. On Earth, in a command center buried 3 kilometers beneath the surface of Antarctica, Admiral Taiyang watched the broadcast with the same calm expression he always wore. Around him, dozens of officers monitored screens showing every ship. In the Vrex fleet, every weapon system, every tactical formation. An hour, he said quietly. How generous of him. Dai Haiyan stood next to the Admiral, still wearing his simple gray suit, despite being in a military facility. Should we respond? Oh, we'll respond, Taiyang replied, but not with words. He touched his command console. Activate Final Curtain Protocol. It's time to show the galaxy what humanity really is. Across the Sol system, things that had been hiding for centuries began to reveal themselves. The asteroid belt suddenly came alive. Thousands of rocks that had drifted in space since the formation of the solar system opened up like flowers, revealing weapons platforms bristling with railguns and missile batteries. Each one had been hollowed out by mining robots over decades, filled with military hardware, and placed in perfect defensive positions. Mars stopped spinning. The entire planet locked into place for just a moment, and then its surface began to split along massive seams. The red dust that covered the world fell away in vast sheets, revealing that the entire planet's crust was artificial. Beneath it lay the largest shipyard humanity had ever built, a construction facility the size of a continent. And sitting in its docks were ships that made the unseen horizon look small. City-sized dreadnoughts that had taken 50 years to build in absolute secrecy. The moon changed. Its familiar gray surface rippled and shifted as camouflage systems shut down. What had appeared to be impact craters were actually weapons emplacements. What had looked like mountains were actually fortress towers. Humanity had turned its natural satellite into the most heavily defended position in the galaxy. And Earth itself, beautiful blue Earth with its white clouds and green continent, began to transform. The oceans drained away into underground reservoirs, revealing massive launch bays built into the ocean floors. Ship after ship rose from these hidden bases, fresh from construction facilities that had operated beneath the waves for 300 years. Overlord Krill watched all of this happen with growing horror. His sensor officers were screaming reports at him, updating the tactical display with new contacts every second. The number of human ships kept climbing. 10,000, 20,000, 50,000, 100,000. "This is impossible," he whispered, but the displays didn't lie. Humanity had somehow hidden an armada larger than his own fleet right under the galaxy's nose. 200,000 contacts and rising, his tactical officer reported, her voice breaking with fear. "Admiral, they outnumber us 4-1. Recommend immediate retreat." "No," Krill snarled. "We have come too far. All ships, attack formation. We will overwhelm them with pure aggression." The Vrex fleet surged forward, 53,000 ships accelerating toward Earth. But the human fleet didn't move to intercept them. Instead, they simply waited, forming a defensive sphere around their homeworld. "They're going to let us come to them," Krill's tactical officer said. "Admiral, this feels like a trap." "Everything is a trap with these creatures," Krill replied. "But traps only work if we're afraid to spring them. All ships, maintain attack speed. Prepare to fire on my command." But before the Vrex fleet could close to weapons range, space itself began to fold. Dr. Minho's experimental dimensional technology, perfected over decades of secret research, activated on a massive scale. Portals opened across the battlefield, and through them came even more human ships. These were different from the others. Stranger, some of them seemed to exist in multiple places at once. Others phased in and out of normal space. And a few simply looked wrong, as if they'd been designed using mathematics that shouldn't work. "Contact from Earth," Krill's communications officer reported. "It's Admiral Tai Yang." The Admiral's face appeared on the screen, calm and grandfatherly despite commanding the largest military force in galactic history. "Overlord Krill, I'm going to give you one more chance to leave. Take your ships and go home. This doesn't have to end in violence." "You think your numbers frighten me?" Krill roared. "My warriors are the finest in the galaxy. Your ships may outnumber mine, but we will break them through sheer skill and courage." Tai Yang sighed. "I was afraid you'd say that." He nodded to someone off-screen. "Agent Nari, if you would." Suddenly, chaos erupted across the Vrex fleet. Ships began firing on each other. Navigation systems shut down. Weapons turned against their own vessels. On dozens of bridges, disguised human agents revealed themselves taking control of systems they'd spent years learning to operate. Nari's voice came over the fleet-wide channel. "Hello again, Overlord. Remember all those advisors you trusted? All those technical specialists you hired? All those crew members who seemed so loyal?" She smiled. "We've been here all along, waiting." Krill's own ship lurched as its engines cut out. His security team rushed onto the bridge, but half of them were human agents who'd been living as Vrex for decades. They moved with practiced precision, disabling the real Vrex soldiers before they could react. "Overlord Krill," Nari said, standing now on his own bridge with a weapon pointed at his head. "You are under arrest for war crimes, attempted genocide, and really poor strategic planning." Across the Vrex fleet, similar scenes played out. Hundreds of ships surrendered without firing a shot. Others tried to fight, but found their weapon systems sabotaged. A few managed to launch attacks, but the human fleet responded with overwhelming force, disabling enemy vessels rather than destroying them when possible. The battle, such as it was, lasted 43 minutes. When it ended, the entire Vrex Armada had either surrendered or been disabled. Human casualties: 12 wounded, 0 dead. Vrex casualties: thousands of ships captured intact, crews taken prisoner, and one very angry overlord in handcuffs. Admiral Tai Yang surveyed the battlefield from his command center and allowed himself a small smile. "Status report? All enemy ships secured," an officer reported. "Marine teams are boarding to take formal custody. No civilian casualties on Earth. The colonies are reporting similar victories. Sir, we've effectively ended the Vrex Empire's military threat in a single day." "Good," Tai Yang replied. "Now comes the hard part. We have to figure out what kind of galaxy we want to build from here." Daihan looked at the tactical display showing the captured Vrex ships. "We should probably start by calling another council session. I think they'll be much more willing to listen to our suggestions now." "Suggestions?" Tai Yang asked with a slight smile. "Fine," Daihan amended. "Our requirements. We're going to rebuild this galaxy into something better. Somewhere that peaceful species can actually survive without becoming conquerors themselves." On the bridge of the infinite conquest, Overlord Krill sat in restraints and watched as human marines secured his ship. He'd brought the largest invasion force in history to Earth, and he'd lost without landing a single blow. Agent Nari sat down across from him, finally dropping her Vrex disguise. Her features shifted, the genetic modifications reversing to reveal her true human form. She was younger than Krill had thought, with kind eyes that seemed completely at odds with the ruthless efficiency she'd displayed. 23 years, Krill said bitterly. "You served me for 23 years. "How?" "Training," Nari replied simply. "And a cause worth fighting for. You wanted to build an empire through conquest. We wanted to make sure no one else had to live in fear of empires like yours." "You can't change the galaxy," Krill said. "There will always be species like mine. Always be conquerors." "Maybe," Nari agreed. "But now there will also always be us, watching, waiting, ready to stop you." She stood up and walked to the viewport, looking out at the human fleet surrounding them. "Welcome to the new galactic order, Overlord. One where humanity doesn't rule, but one where we make sure no one else rules through fear either." Outside, Earth continued to spin peacefully in the darkness, protected by the greatest secret in galactic history. A secret that was secret no more. The Galactic Council convened 6 months after the siege of Earth. The meeting chamber was the same as always, a ring of metal and glass floating in neutral space. But everything else had changed. Where Overlord Krill had once sat in his throne-like seat, there was now a much smaller chair occupied by a humble Vrex administrator named Kelvin. The Vrex Empire still existed, but it was a shadow of its former self. Its military had been reduced to basic system defense forces. Its conquered worlds had been returned to their original inhabitants. And its new government was focused on rebuilding rather than conquering. Dei stood in the center of the chamber once again. But this time, the other delegates didn't look at him with contempt. They watched him with a mixture of respect and fear. He represented the single most powerful military force in the galaxy, and everyone in the room knew it. The purpose of today's session, he began, is to ratify the new Galactic Charter, a set of laws and principles that will govern how we all interact going forward. The Kishari delegate, her crystalline body chiming nervously, raised a question. And if we refuse to sign this charter? Deihan's expression remained pleasant. Then you'll be choosing to exist outside the protection of galactic law. If someone attacks you, enslaves your people, or takes your worlds, the Council will not intervene. You'll be on your own. That's a threat, the Polvax ambassador bubbled through his translator. No, Deihan corrected. It's a statement of fact. For too long, this council has been a place where the strong pretended to make rules while actually just taking whatever they wanted. That ends today. Either we build a galaxy with real laws that apply to everyone, or we admit that we're just predators pretending to be civilized. He gestured to the display screens around the chamber. The charter is simple. No species may conquer another. No species may enslave another. Disputes will be settled through negotiation and arbitration, not violence. And any species that violates these rules will face the consequences. Consequences enforced by humanity, you mean, the Kishari delegate said. Yes, Deihan agreed without hesitation. We have the power to enforce these rules, so we will. But we won't rule you. We won't take your worlds or dictate your governance. We'll just make sure that everyone plays by the same rules. Captain Jiwan stood near the back of the chamber, wearing her full military uniform now, instead of hiding in the shadows. She watched the delegates whisper among themselves, calculating whether they could survive without signing the charter. Most of them were coming to the same conclusion. They couldn't. The galaxy had changed. Species that had built their power on conquest and slavery were suddenly finding themselves isolated. Their neighbors, freed from fear, were no longer willing to tolerate their behavior. And the human fleet, now visible and acknowledged, made it clear what would happen to anyone who tried to restart the old ways. I have a question, said a new voice. A small reptilian delegate from a species called T. Thorin stepped forward. You say you won't rule us. But how can we trust that? You have all the power. What stops you from becoming the next empire? Deihan smiled. It was a question he'd been expecting. Because we don't want to rule you. We never did. We just wanted to be left alone to live our lives. He paused, choosing his words carefully. 300 years ago, we watched the Talendi die because we were too weak to help them. We swore that day that we would never be weak again. But we also swore that we would never become the monsters we were afraid of. He pulled up an image on the display screens. It showed a memorial on Earth, a wall covered with names. Millions of them. These are the names of every person who died in conflicts with aggressive species over the past 300 years. We remember every single one. And we remember why they died. They died because the galaxy was a place where might made right, where the peaceful were preyed upon by the strong. The chamber fell silent as delegates looked at the endless list of names. We built our fleet so that no one else would have to build a memorial like this. Deihan continued, so that peaceful species could stay peaceful without being destroyed for it. That's all we've ever wanted. Admiral Taiyang's voice came through the speakers from where he watched the proceedings from Earth. The charter includes provisions for oversight. An independent council of judges from multiple species who can review our actions. If we abuse our power, the galaxy will know. And we're willing to share our defensive technologies with any species that signs the charter. You'll be able to protect yourselves without needing us to do it for you." The Thorin delegate considered this. "You would give us weapons? Technology?" "Defensive technology," Taiyang clarified. "Shields, sensors, stealth systems. Things that let you protect your homes without threatening others. We're not going to arm the galaxy for war, but we will make sure everyone can defend themselves." Hannah stepped forward, her role as the head of the new galactic peacekeeping force, making her one of the most important people in the room. "We've already begun liberating worlds that were conquered by the Vrex Empire. In the past 6 months, we've freed 42 civilizations and helped them rebuild. We're not asking for payment or tribute. We're just helping because it's the right thing to do." One by one, delegates began to nod. The math was simple. And either they signed the charter and got protection, technology, and help rebuilding, or they refused and faced an uncertain future alone. It wasn't really a choice at all. "I have one more question," the Kashari delegate said. "What happens to those of us who have done things we're not proud of? My species has enslaved others in the past. Will we be punished?" Deihayan looked at her thoughtfully. "That depends. Are you willing to free those you've enslaved? Make reparations? Change your ways?" The crystalline being seemed to vibrate with emotion. "Yes, yes, we are." "Then no, you won't be punished. The charter looks forward, not backward. We're trying to build something better, not seek revenge for the past." He paused. "But the slaves go free today. That's not negotiable." "Agreed," the Kishari delegate said quietly. Over the next hour, every species in the chamber signed the charter. Some did it enthusiastically, relieved to finally live in a galaxy with rules. Others signed reluctantly, knowing they had no real choice. But they all signed. When it was done, Deihayan looked around the chamber one last time. "Good, then let's get to work. We have a lot of civilizations to rebuild, a lot of wrongs to right, and a lot of trust to build. It won't be easy, but it will be worth it." He walked out of the chamber, and Hannah fell into step beside him. "Do you think it will actually work?" she asked quietly. "Can we really change the galaxy?" "I don't know," Deihayan admitted, "but we have to try. We didn't build the largest fleet in galactic history just to use it. We built it so we wouldn't have to use it." Back on Earth, in his office overlooking a peaceful park, Deihayan stood before the memorial wall. It wasn't a large public one, but his own private collection. Photographs of every human who had died in the long secret war. Friends, colleagues, agents who had sacrificed everything so that humanity could survive. "We did it," he said softly to the photographs. "We made the galaxy safer. Not perfect, but better." He turned to look out the window at children playing below. They had no idea about the fleet in orbit, about the weapons platforms hidden in the asteroid belt, about the dimensional portals that could bring reinforcements from anywhere in human space in seconds. They didn't need to know. They could just be children, playing in parks, living peaceful lives. That was the whole point. His communicator buzzed. Admiral Taiyang's face appeared on the screen. "Sir, we're detecting something at the galactic rim. A massive energy signature moving toward our space. It's not like anything we've seen before." Deihayan's peaceful moment shattered. "How massive?" "Bigger than the Vrex fleet. Much bigger. And it's heading straight for the nearest inhabited systems." Taiyang paused. "Sir, the Council is already calling. They want to know if we can help." Deihayan looked back at the photographs on his wall, then at the children in the park below. Then he straightened his tie and picked up his jacket. "Tell them yes. We can help. That's what we do now. Should I recall the fleet from its current missions?" "Not yet," Let's find out what we're dealing with first. Day Hyon headed for the door. And get me everything we have on the galactic rim. If something big is coming, I want to know what it is before it gets here. As he left his office, he couldn't help but smile slightly. For 300 years, humanity had prepared for every threat they could imagine. They'd built weapons for scenarios that seemed impossible. They'd trained for battles they hoped would never come about, and now, with the galaxy finally at peace, something new had appeared. Something unknown. Something that would test everything humanity had built. But they were ready. They were always ready. Outside his window, the stars continued to shine peacefully. But in the darkness between those stars, the hidden Armada began to stir once more. Ships powered up their weapon systems. Soldiers reported to their stations. And across human space, a civilization that had spent 3 centuries preparing for war began preparing once again. The sky had torn apart once to reveal humanity's secret. The question now was simple. What would they reveal next time? And somewhere in the depths of space, beyond the galactic rim, where no exploration vessel had ever traveled, something ancient and vast turned its attention toward the small species that had just made itself known. Something that had been waiting in the darkness for eons, watching for civilizations that grew strong enough to be worth its attention. Humanity had wanted to be left alone. But the universe, it seemed, had other plans. The real test was about to begin.